Hi, everyone. Pete Sardis for the lawyer you know. Aiden Fucci's sentencing has begun. I want to take some time to talk to you about the sentencing proceedings generally and what you can expect out of that process. I also want to talk about what day one of sentencing looked like and some of the highlights of the testimony that the court heard. And I want to just have a moment so we can discuss what I think is going to be coming up in the next few days. It's supposed to be a 3-day sentencing, meaning we should have a sentence for Aiden Fucci finalized on Friday. So let's go through this. Sentencing is the time when the court renders a sentence for a crime, all right? And normally that sentence is based on the facts and the circumstances surrounding the offense, the intent of the crime, the impact of the victims and the victim's family. This case, because of the nature of it, is going to be long sentencing. And the reason it's going to be long is because there was no trial. And the court really does not have a full comprehension of the extent of Aiden Fucci's mental state, for example. He doesn't really have a good feel for what the premeditation would have been. He doesn't, even though he understands the general gist of what the facts are, I think the court really needs the state to put on a bunch of evidence to give the court a foundation so that the court can put out a fair and just sentence for Aiden Fucci. Understand that in adult court, sentencing is designed to punish the offender. That's the purpose of it by statute. But recognizing that Aiden Fucci was 14 years old at the time that he committed the offenses, and he's 16 years old now sitting in front of a judge waiting to be sentenced, I think the court is going to have to take a little bit more time and consider the rehabilitativeness or the rehabilitation possibility of Aiden Fucci, because at the end of the day, he is a child. Even though the crime is horrific, the circumstances are heinous to say the least, it's still a child that he's dealing with. So I think that the court, Judge Smith, is going to take some extra time to really get a feel for whether or not Aiden Fucci can be rehabilitated. I'm going to tell you kind of what has happened. So what is the court going to receive into evidence? All right, the court's going to get a number of witness statements, testimony, basically like you would in a trial. He's already heard from some teachers. He's heard from some law enforcement folks. He has heard from some friends and family of Tristan Bailey, and he's heard from a psychologist. He has also received 130 community victim impact statements. So what does that mean? If you recall, there was a huge witness list that was provided by the state and an equally huge witness list provided by the defense. At this point, I think the state's made a decision that a lot of the victim impact statements are going to be provided to the court in writing, meaning that they've asked people to actually put their thoughts on paper so that they can provide those to the court, and the court can read them, at some other time outside of the proceedings, just to kind of pare this sentencing down so it doesn't take 2 weeks, for example. Evidence. The evidence standards in sentencing, especially this sentencing, are going to be a little bit more lax than what we would expect to see in a trial. Now, when you have a trial and you've got a jury in a box, the defense and the state are obligated to follow the Florida rules of evidence. There are specific rules that say what evidence is admissible, what testimony is admissible, what is not admissible. Things like hearsay is not admissible. Things like statements of people that are not able to be questioned by by the parties, people that are not available for cross-examination. Those types of things are not normally admissible. There are a lot of exceptions to these rules, but we're just speaking generally. When it comes to evidence, things that cannot be corroborated, things that don't have a chain of custody, things, items that are not somehow tied to the offense and that have a tendency to prove or disprove something material in the case. Sentencing is a bit different. And the reason it's different is because in sentencings, the court, especially, there's no jury. So the court is really doing the majority of the fact findings. So the rules are a little bit more lax. Now, I'm not saying that the rules of evidence don't exist. You still have to have foundations. You still have to have some sort of basis for the evidence that you're putting forward. There has to be some correlation to the crime. It cannot just be evidence thrown in to just make Aiden Fucci look worse than he already does. There has to be foundation to it, and the court is obviously understands this concept, but the nuances that we may have seen in objections during a trial in front of a jury are not the things that we're going to see here in sentencing. The court's got a little bit more latitude to accept evidence in order to kind of get a better picture for purposes of sentencing. So that's kind of what the proceedings are going to look like over the course of the next 3 days. Let's talk generally about what day one looked like. The state started day one with the videotape of Aiden Fucci in the interview room with his mother and stepfather before his interrogation by law enforcement. So understand, this is way back when, within a day or so of Tristan Bailey's murder, or at least a day or so of the police finding out that she was missing, and they interviewed Aiden Fucci. And I think the court got a very good feel for Aiden Fucci as a 14-year-old boy shortly after the murder. His parents are in this room, and frankly, I give his stepfather a lot of credit. He's in there, he's giving him good advice, like, look, man, you got to stick to a story, get it straight. Where were you? Did you have any contact with her? Did you do anything with her? Did you kiss her? Trying to get Aiden to really open up and give them an indication about what it is that they're dealing with so they can evaluate the severity of the circumstances. Aiden Fucci in that videotape is as cool, calm, and collected as anyone could be, sitting in a police station, being about to be interviewed by law enforcement about a murder. He denies everything. He's like, I may have walked with her for a little bit, but I didn't do anything. I wasn't there. I may have kissed her, but it didn't go any farther. So the parents, I think, are led to believe by Aiden that this set of circumstances just is not his problem. He didn't do anything. He just happened to be at a bad place at the wrong time. And Aiden Fucci's stepfather actually says, he's like, man, in the video, man, this is a bad idea, going out with females in the middle of the night. This is just bad. You shouldn't do this stuff because, you can get in a lot of trouble. That obviously would have been a good time for Aiden Fucci's parents to probably assert the assistance of counsel and basically tell Aiden to tell law enforcement he's not talking to anybody until a lawyer gets there. But I digress. We are where we are at this point for the purpose of a defense. Law enforcement did in fact interview him. I think the state put this video on to show the judge how callous, how cold Aiden Fucci was when talking about Tristan Bailey's murder, a 13-year-old girl that he had stabbed 114 times, hours before, and how just uninterested or just completely flat affect that he has about the crime itself. And I think it was a good start to say, hey, judge, here's how this case started. The case continued with a crime scene technician. And this is a person who was involved in taking photographs and documenting the search warrant on Aiden Fucci's house. And she kind of went through a number of photographs and a number of things in evidence that she had processed. A lot of those being, for example, photographs of his room, photographs of clothing that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement ultimately determined were blood stains, that blood matching Tristan Bailey's blood type. She also took some photographs of the house generally. There were a number of I'll give you an example. The tennis shoes that he was wearing, there was dirt inside of the treads of those tennis shoes. That dirt matches the soil that was near the murder scene. So again, a corroboration for how law enforcement kind of went down the line systematically in their investigation and gathered legitimate evidence that showed that Aiden Fucci was connected to Tristan Bailey's murder. One of the things that I found very interesting was that they apparently also had photographed and had the lab take into possession the jeans that Aiden Fucci was apparently wearing on the night of the murder. That, if you recall, is the focus of Aiden's mother's prosecution for tampering with evidence, because she attempted to wash those jeans in order to, remove any evidence of blood, soil, whatever, DNA that would have been on those pants. Apparently, they did still go to the lab, and the lab did identify blood stains on those jeans. So I guess washing those pants did not have the effect that Mrs. Smith expected it was going to have. Other than that, photographs of the pictures that we've talked about in the past in Aiden Fucci's room inside of his notebooks. Pictures of a knife-wielding character. There's basically a drawing of what appears to be Aiden Fucci holding a knife, and it's kind of got a demonic look to it, for lack of a better term. There's also some additional pictures, one of which shows a female, obviously it's a drawing of a female body, long hair, with what appears to me to either be stab wounds or just basically red pencil marks on it. I didn't get a great view of it because it kind of flashed on the screen quickly. Just some red marks indicating the intent or the body is being stabbed. So these are things that were found in Aiden Fucci's room that were collected as evidence that would have been presented as evidence at the trial, but are now being presented by the state, so the court can really have a better indication about the mens rea, the mental state of Aiden Fucci at the time of the crime, meaning that there is some premeditation here. A lot of the clothes were found hidden behind a dresser or in places that were not in plain view. The drawings, I think the state wants to show the court that this is something that Aiden Fucci had been planning for a long time. This was not an impulse. This was not a heat of the moment, a heat of passion, as we call it, killing. This was a killing that was done with premeditation. This is something that he had thought about for a long time, and that is what these photographs showed. There were a few victim impact statements that were presented on the first day, and those victim impact statements were basically some teachers, friends, and the coach of Tristan Bailey. The purpose really was to give the court an understanding about Tristan Bailey from the perspective of outsiders of the community. She was a kind girl. Apparently, she was her cheer captain, so she had leadership skills, and people liked her. There was a mother of a child that spoke that said how kind Tristan Bailey was to her son, and I guess he's probably a little bit awkward, and she was just very kind and inclusive of him, and that is something that she believes really positively affected her child. And everybody the consensus is that everybody's heart is missing a piece after Tristan Bailey was murdered. She had so much to offer and had done so much as a 13-year-old girl already that her life being cut short not only was tragic for her and her immediate family, but it was also a loss to her community, to her athletic, to her teammates, to the school. So I think a number of very touching elements that gave the judge an indication of what type of a person Tristan Bailey was. And to say that, you never want to characterize a victim, based on a lifestyle choice or who they are, but they're trying to show that Tristan Bailey is literally a wholesome, good American girl with not a bad bone in her body. She wasn't spoiled. She wasn't cruel. She was not, a bully. She was not any of those things. She was nothing but a kind-hearted child that did not deserve, obviously nothing anybody else does, to be murdered, and absolutely was a victim that will be missed tragically, will be missed in her community for a long time to come. Beyond that, the court's going to read the 130 or so statements to get a better feel for what other community statements or impacts this crime has had. And I think, realistically speaking, the state will normally pick out the victims' impacts, the victims that are going to speak, and kind of get a feeling for what the rest of those 130 letters are going to look like. It gives the judge a kind of an indication about what is going to be the sentiment generally about the community. Now, let's be clear, I'm kind of jumping ahead a bit. Tristan Bailey's family is going to speak, and that's going to be on day 2, and we're going to follow along with what they say. They're known as the Bailey 7. They show up to court wearing teal, which is Tristan Bailey's favorite color, and they have a slogan, and it's Bailey Strong. So we're going to hear, I think, some very harsh words, some very deep emotion on day 2, and we'll cover that as I get that information. The next the next witness that I think was very, very powerful in this sentencing was a gentleman by the name of oh gosh, Gregory Pritchard. Gregory Pritchard is a psychologist. He is the psychologist that the state retained in order to give a picture of Aiden Fucci's psychological state to the jury, and I think he did a wonderful job imparting that information onto the court. His testimony is pretty much this. He interviewed a lot of people. He interviewed Aiden Fucci's friends. He interviewed Aiden Fucci's girlfriend at the time. He interviewed teachers. He interviewed the inmates at the jail. He interviewed the security guards. He evaluated medical records and psychiatric records from the school. He actually spoke to Aiden Fucci's family members in order to get a general indication about what Aiden Fucci is as a person, to not just talk about his psychological factors, but all of those factors around him, the people that surrounded him, to kind of get a better handle on what he was in the persona that he projected. So here's what we get. Dr. Pritchard says that there is no characterization that Aiden Fucci is immature. In fact, the description that he got from the people that he spoke with was that Aiden Fucci was actually very mature and that he was considered to be a leader among his peers. He was, I guess, the alpha in his pack. All of his little buddies, that he was friends with, looked to him for decision making. His teachers indicated that although he did struggle academically in some areas and that he was in some classes, some special needs classes, his teachers say that it wasn't about the fact that he was incapable of processing the information. Actually, rather, it was the contrary. His teacher said he actually had the capacity to learn and to absorb the material, but he lacked the motivation to do it, which is what had put him in some of these other classes, non-mainstream classes. Another, I think, very telling part of Dr. Pritchard's testimony was the characterization of Zophie Bowman. Zophie Bowman was a girlfriend of Aiden Fucci at the time that these murders happened. And what she told Dr. Pritchard was that apparently Aiden Fucci had indicated to her that either she was not allowed to stay over at his house or he would not stay over at her house because he told her that she would be easy to kill while she slept, which, I mean, talk about a very, looming, odd statement for a 14-year-old boy to say, that she would be easy to kill. She commented that he would always ask things like, what would you do if I killed somebody? What would you do if I stabbed someone? Apparently, he had a preoccupation with death and he had a fascination with specifically stabbing. And Dr. Pritchard indicated that fantasy is like rehearsal. When you fantasize, you kind of go over something in your head. What you're actually doing is practicing, so when the time comes, you already have your script set out and you know what you're going to do. Zophie indicated that Aiden was violent. There was apparently a time that she recalled that Aiden Fucci beat up a kid at a food truck over a vape pen, and she indicated that he really expressed a lot of verbalization about wanting to hurt people, not just random people, wanting to hurt people that he liked, and that is, mania, for lack of a better term. It's not a violent crime. It's not a heat of the moment event. It's not, I don't like someone because they've hurt me. He actually had expressed over the course of time a desire to hurt people that he was friends with. Just strange as strange can be, frankly. Trey Abshire was Aiden Fucci's best friend at the time. He corroborates pretty much what Zophie Bowman had said to Dr. Pritchard. And apparently he had a discussion at some point with Aiden Fucci, and the discussion was that Aiden Fucci thought that it would be satisfying to slit someone's throat and watch the blood, drain out of him. He said that Fucci would say a lot of these weird things at strange times. Like he would say things at odd times, and it would always like kind of throw that, what? Why would you say that kind of statement, kind of thought process in Mr. I guess Mr. Abshire's mind, but completely corroborated what Sophie Bowman said. Obviously, a young man with a lot of really sick preoccupations. Home and background, very telling. There is an indication, and these come from second-hand accounts from people that were close to Aiden Fucci, that he apparently didn't feel loved at home. He didn't feel like he was an important member of his family, realizing his mom had remarried. They were part of a blended family because Aiden's stepfather had, children that were obviously part of the family unit, and he felt as if he was completely unimportant. He characterized his biological father as physically abusive, that he would punch and slap and hurt him. And he also indicated that he would experience emotional abuse from his mother, to the point where Sophie had indicated that she had told Aiden that he needed to report the abuse because she felt that it rose to the level of abuse to that needed to be reported, but Aiden refused. So Dr. Pritchard talks to Aiden Fucci's siblings. The siblings do not corroborate any of Aiden Fucci's allegations about the family. In fact, they say the exact opposite. His stepbrother says that Aiden Fucci had a great biological father that was very involved in his life, that never missed a visitation day, never missed a holiday, never missed any events that he was allowed to or supposed to be at based on the court order that the parents had for their custody of Aiden. They also say, and this is Aiden Fucci's biological brother, says that their stepdad was great. He treated both of them with respect. He was caring with Aiden, and he tried to be a role model that Aiden could look up to, and was basically there for him for whatever troubled him or whatever he needed. About mom, Aiden's maternal grandmother says that Miss Smith was a wonderful mother. She cared deeply about her children. She was there for them all the time. She lived for them and for Aiden. So his representation, meaning Aiden Fucci's representations to his friends about his family, are markedly different than the family saying about what they experienced or what they observed from Aiden Fucci's father, his stepfather, and his mother, and how that family interaction happened. Dr. Pritchard does give the court a diagnosis. The diagnosis meaning that Aiden Fucci does have a history of moments of schizophrenia. He does believe that there is an impulse control disorder in his past. And even though Aiden Fucci is calm as a cucumber sitting in court, I'm going to tell you it's probably because he's medicated, and he really just has a flat affect because he's just sitting there listening to all this testimony, no physical reaction, no facial reactions to speak of, just basically sitting there rocking back and forth in his chair, and not really having much of a reaction you would expect to hear when people are talking about you and your psychology and the things that you've said and done, in a murder. You'd think you'd have a little bit more, at least more reaction to that stuff. Dr. Pritchard also talked to the inmates at the jail and also spoke to some of the guards. And apparently Aiden Fucci had tried to extort some of his co-inmates for commissary benefits, to buy him food and things like that. And he would threaten to stab them and their families when he got out. Realistically speaking, what do you think the chances of Aiden Fucci at age 14 threatening an adult man inmate at a jail? How far do you think it's going to go? How realistic do you think those threats were? But for the fact that it's, again, his preoccupation in his mind, that's his thing. He's going to kill you. He's going to stab you. That's how he's going to cause you harm. He's going to stab the ones you love as soon as he gets out of jail, meaning I can't harm you, but I can harm your loved ones when you're still in here and I'm out there. Apparently said the same things to a lot of the deputies. Again, they did report those things, but I don't think any of those deputies felt truly threatened by Aiden Fucci. Dr. Pritchard said that when he looked at the videotape, especially when you look at the videos of the dash cam video in the police car where Aiden Fucci is in the car, and you see some of the text messages Has anybody seen Tristan lately? Things like that. Dr. Pritchard says that Aiden Fucci's enjoying the process of covering up the crime. He actually thought it was fun. He was enjoying this thing. And I think, this is me speaking now, that he wanted to commit a crime, to kill, to see what it was like to kill, to feel the emotion that he would experience in killing another human being, and then enjoying the process of getting away with the crime, of basically fooling everyone to believe that he had nothing to do with it. So that is what I think, my personal opinion, was his motive for this crime. The prognosis, poor for rehabilitation. Yeah, kind of figured on that one. He shows no remorse, and this was a very telling statement that Dr. Pritchard said. Aiden Fucci is unique in a bad way. I mean, how deep is that? Just a cold-blooded, stone-cold killer. And at this point, that was put on by the state for the court to recognize any thoughts that he's having about rehabilitating this young man, about giving him the tools while he's incarcerated to make him a better person, are probably going to be wasted, because he is a sociopath and he is a danger to the community, and basically that he needs to be locked up for the rest of his life, because the death penalty is off the table. It is not something that can happen to Aiden Fucci, but life in prison sure as heck is. So that is what that was designed to do. Let's talk about day 2. It's going to be the family. I don't know how long it's going to be. It's supposed to start 9 o'clock in the morning, so I will follow this and kind of give you an update as soon as it is done. I anticipate the Bailey family is going to be heart-wrenching. They've lost their child. It is going to be probably the most difficult day of testimony, and I will follow it with you and kind of give you my thoughts. Day 3, I anticipate, is going to be reserved for the defense. I presume, I don't know, that they're going to put on a psychologist, or presume they're going to put on some family members or someone to talk about the good things of Aiden Fucci, whatever those good things are, and we'll follow along with that. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Really, I'm kind of getting the material that I'm giving you by your questions down below. So leave those for me, and I'll be back with you as soon as day 2 is over for that update.
Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle, and don't forget to listen to The Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.